really exciting turnout for us. It's our first educational big event, so thank you all so much for making the effort to be here today. My name is Madison Slopin, and I'm a member of the Progressive Jewish Alliance, UBC's new left-wing progressive Jewish club. Before introducing our speaker, I wanted to acknowledge that we're here today on the traditional, ancestral, and unceded territory of the Musqueam Nation, and as predominantly white Jewish settlers in the club, we feel extremely grateful to be visitors here on this land working and living here. Also, we passed out cue cards to everybody. We're using the cue card method for our question and answer period. If you have a question that you would like Mr. Shapira to answer, please write it down on the cue card in front of you. Members of the PJA will come around and collect the cue cards at the beginning of the question segment. Okay, now to introduce our speaker. Yonatan Shapira will speak about his transformation from an obedient officer in the Israeli Air Force to a solidarity activist. Shapira was one of 27 Israeli Air Force soldiers who denounced assassinations carried out in the densely populated Gaza Strip. These 27 officers were then dismissed from the Air Force, and Yonatan went on to co-found the organization Combatants for Peace with other Israeli and Palestinian ex-fighters. He sailed on 3 of the boats carrying humanitarian aid and nonviolent activists that seek to break the longstanding Israeli siege of the Gaza Strip. Shapira has taken part in numerous other nonviolent actions and campaigns in opposition to the Israeli occupation of Palestinian territory. We're very excited to be hosting Mr. Shapira today, so please thank him with me.
Hi, good evening. Can you hear me well like that, or?
Yeah.
I just recently lost my voice, so I have half a tone of strepsils to help me cope. I just want to say thank you very much for the organizers. I know it's been quite a difficult task to coordinate. It's about a week and a half of a speaking tour, and I just came from Tel Aviv on Sunday, so I'm still a little jet lagged, so forgive me if I fall asleep a little. But I'm really happy to be here, and I hope my voice will carry and keep on until the end of the evening. I think the main target, the main idea for this kind of meeting is to have an open discussion and to allow dialogue with some of you here tonight that maybe not necessarily agreeing with me. What you didn't mention at the beginning is that I'm now a member of a group called Boycott from Within, or an Israeli citizens that support the Palestinian call for boycott, divestment, and sanctions. And I know it's kind of an inflammatory, controversial issue in some circles, and I'm willing to talk about my decision to join this movement and the detailed and different campaigns that happen in this movement, and also to listen to different opinions of people that do not necessarily share this view, and it's totally fine. You are welcome to ask any kind of questions, personal, political, moral, philosophical, whatever you find interesting. I will do my best to answer you. And of course I might be wrong on some of the issues, and it's totally fine if you feel different. We saw a few people demonstrating outside from the Jewish Defense League. If I could, I would just say, come in and listen. Maybe it will affect you, or maybe you want to ask some questions. I don't want to just preach to the choir, and maybe most of the people here today are in agreement with me, maybe not, but let's respect those who are here who are still considering and are not necessarily in the same boat with us toward Gaza. I will say some hard things, some things that will sound radical or problematic. I want you to know that it's all from a place of love to my friends, my people, my family, my Jewish tradition, culture, and to all the people that live in this piece of land, Palestinians, Israelis, refugees, and to people in general. I think when you act out of love to humanity, you can be more effective than just from a place of hate and anger. And I admit that I do hate sometimes, and I do feel anger sometimes, especially when I listen to the news, or I'm beaten by a soldier, or I hear about another child that was killed recently. But when we come to act, my preference is to connect to the places deep inside us that are positive and see how I can contribute in a good way to the solution. I say that because when I started to be active after I refused, it was already 12 years ago, I didn't even think that I have to mention it. I didn't think, for example, that I have to mention that for like 13 years I used to volunteer in an organization giving aid and support to terror victims in the Israeli society. New immigrants that came and lost their loved ones, or got injured, or were harmed in one way or another. I thought that it's kind of bragging, and I don't need to even bring it to any kind of discussion, because it's not about what I'm going to talk about. It's not about occupation, it's not about the resistance. And I found out that it's important to mention that, because for those who do not agree, for those who are still somewhere on this spectrum of the process, from being hardline nationalist or Zionist to starting to connect more and more to your heart and to your compassion and love to people in general, I think it's important to mention that. So my heart is very much still dealing with all these things, and how I can alleviate the pain of everyone, regardless their ethnicity, their race, their religion. Yeah, I know that many lectures about the conflict are with lots of details, numbers, years, maps, PowerPoint presentations. I'm not going to do that today. I think each one of you is intelligent enough to open one of these websites, and if you are not familiar, I can later tell you different websites, different media sources that are good and accurate, in my opinion. If you are still not believing the others and you want to hear it from Israelis, there is a group of Israeli soldiers publishing testimonies of other soldiers and themselves about the war crimes they committed during their service in the West Bank and Gaza. It's called Breaking the Silence. They are not very political. They don't agree with me, for example, about BDS and things like that. But the information is all out there. It exists, and it's today with the internet, it's really easy to know what's the situation on the ground. Nevertheless, I will tell you some of my experiences, but it's not going to be like a historical lecture. So I'll try to talk about half an hour and then give most of the time for question and answers. And please, hard questions, and don't make it easy on me. Wherever you are on this spectrum, it's all legitimate. Before I start to tell you a little bit about my journey, I want to read you a song that my grandfather taught me. He came from Poland. Most of his family was killed in the Holocaust, in the Second World War. And he taught me a song that later was also, it was written in Yiddish in the 1930s. Later was translated to Hebrew and became kind of a song that every Holocaust ceremony put it, and kind of very, very symbolic in that context. The song is like that. Es brennt, mein Städtel es brennt, oi unser Orm Städtel nebach brennt. Weise Winden mit ihr Gasen reißen, brechen und zerblasen, starker noch die wilde Flammen, als herum schon brennt. Und ihr steht und guckt so sich mit verlegter Hand, und ihr steht und guckt so sich, unser Städtel brennt. And the song said basically, it's burning, brothers, it's burning. Please come and help us put out the fire. It's burning, the flames, the dark flames are going, and we are burning. Don't stand still around, embracing your hands while we are burning. Please help. After Operation Cast Lid, it was in the end of 2008, beginning of 2009, I saw the images from Gaza and the numbers of children being burned and killed, and I thought it's maybe time to translate this Yiddish song to Arabic. So with a Palestinian friend of mine, we translated it. So forgive me if I'm not exactly accurate with the pronunciation. Harik ya ikhwan harik. بلادنا حرقت كلها ودخانها الأسود يعلو ويسودها لهب الخراب آثارها لم تبكى إنها بتخترق وأنتم مكتفو الأيدي دون أن تمدوا يد العون وأن تطفئوا لهب النار التي بالبلاد. Just recently, I think it was Thursday night, a jeep from the border police, the Israeli border police, went into the Aida refugee camp next to Bethlehem. I don't know if you heard it on the news. I think it was mentioned in several websites. And the border police officer talked on the megaphone and the loudspeaker from the jeep to the people in the camp, to the Palestinian people in the camp. And that's what he said, shouting. People of Aida refugee camp, this is the Israeli army. You throw stones and we will hit you with gas until you all die. We won't leave any of you alive until you all die. We have arrested one of you, we took him from his home, and we will slaughter and kill him while you watch. If you keep throwing stones, that's what we will do. Go home, or we will gas you until you die. Your family, your children, everyone, we will kill you. Well, it was not exactly the official policy of the Israeli army, so they suspended this officer. But I think a day or two later, not so far from there, in another Palestinian village, an 8-month-old baby was gassed to death. And this is going on as we speak now. So, just to give a little context and to bring us to the issue we are dealing with here. I didn't start as what I am now. I was born in a very comfortable environment of a Zionist family. My father was a fighter pilot in the Israeli Air Force. He was a commander in the Yom Kippur War in 1973. We moved from one base of the Air Force to another, the whole family. My mother was a biology teacher and later on a lecturer in university. got very much strong socialist education, peace, love, humanity, like humanism, freedom, all the nice values, with strong Zionist ideas. It was accompanied by beautiful songs about peace and bereavement, about the heroes that fought to establish the state of Israel. And it all worked together perfectly. And in fact, I remember myself as an elementary school kid so much identifying with my country that I remember even thinking that I'm just like Israel. Sometimes the country is happy, sometimes I'm happy, sometimes it's sad, I'm sad. It's like very naive connection of a boy that looked up to his father and wanted to be like him, so I dreamt to be a pilot in the Air Force. The history lesson I got from school, from books, from my parents were half-sided history to the extent that I didn't know anything about Palestinians. First, they didn't even call it Palestinians, it was Arab Israelis. They didn't want to share the land, to divide the land, so we had to win them in a war, and now we want peace, but the problem is that they don't really want peace. This kind of narrative. And it's amazing that while I was sitting in classroom and learning all this ideology and feeling good with myself and proud with my country and the army, at the same time, millions of people were living under the control of my government, my army, without any rights, without all the beautiful values that they taught us in school, without freedom, without equality, humiliated daily by the oppressor. I think the first time I heard the word Nakba, which means the disaster, referred to 1948 expulsion of 700,000 of Palestinians and demolishing of 5 or more hundreds of towns and villages, was somewhat a few months after I refused. Like I became an activist before even knowing the meaning of the word Nakba. This is just to give you an idea how much the narrative is well sealed from any cracks, any outside information that can stir your thoughts. I joined the military. I was accepted to the pilot course and was very proud to finish it. It's something that many people try, and it's kind of hard tests and physical and emotional and theoretical and practical tests. And a small group finished the course. I was very proud, and it was during the days of the Oslo Agreement and the peace agreement with Jordan. So to me, it was just a perfect combination. I got a good profession. I can fly in the sky. I'm protecting my country. I was a rescue helicopter pilot. I always was like vegetarian. I didn't want to do any harm, so it was a good combination. Doing the good job of rescuing people, bringing them to hospital, sometimes flying soldiers, sometimes search and rescue stuff. It all worked quite well. But slowly, different cracks in the narrative, I call it, happened and started challenging my strong belief in what I'm doing. It's a long process, and I can talk about it for years. I wrote about it, my thesis, when I did my peace and conflict studies. I wrote my thesis about it and this long process, and trying to analyze how it happened and how maybe I can help other people to go through this process. So I can talk a lot about it, but I'll just tell you that the last straw broke the camelback, maybe the last event that shook me enough to think that I really need to do something about it was in 2002 when the house of Salah Shehadeh in Gaza was the leader of the armed branch of Hamas. In the middle of the night, a one-ton bomb was dropped on his house by an F-16 fighter jets. Of course, he was killed together with him, his family members and some neighbors. I think about 15 people, 9 of them children, some babies. A collateral damage of about 150 injured, and a big, big hole in the ground in the Bulj neighborhood, one of the most dense populated neighborhoods in Gaza. And many times I say that together with these children that were killed there, maybe the naive Yonatan that I used to be was also killed there, and I had to reevaluate everything I know until that point. Everything I studied, everything I was taught, everything I was told by my parents, by my friends, by my commanders, by the history books, by my teachers, by the media around me. It just seemed insane. And I remember the moment when I looked at the picture on the news and I thought, this is a terror attack. And I'm a member of this organization. Whether I'm dropping that bomb or I'm flying soldiers to Lebanon or even rescuing people, I'm still part of this organization. And feeling that you are part of a terror organization that kills babies is something that can shake you quite a bit. And for a while I was walking around trying to talk to people, find out things, writing songs, trying to kind of find solutions for my broken beliefs. What happened later is that I went to this dialogue meeting with Palestinian students in this village, Neve Shalom. It's a village that Palestinians and Israeli live together, somewhere between Tel Aviv and Jerusalem. And I didn't want to go. I thought I know it all, you know, kind of pilot, thinking that he's smart and knows all the answers and hold my lefty opinions against the occupation, and you know, no one can tell me something new. But somehow my friend convinced me to come, and I remember in the first session of the meeting, everyone had to say their name, where they're from, why did they come to the meeting, and some event that influenced them. And I planned a nice speech to say that I'm a pilot in the Air Force, but I want peace, I'm against occupation, and these targeted assassinations that are done by the Air Force were what led me to come to this meeting, because I am against them. Okay, so I planned to say that, and then the guy next to me, a Palestinian guy from Nablus, started talking and say that he also wants to have peace and is also against occupation. He wants to put an end to it. And the event that affected him mostly lately is that some months ago, his sister got paralyzed from the chest down when an Apache helicopter shot a missile to their neighbor house in Balata refugee camp in Nablus. And then came my turn. And I had to say that I'm a helicopter pilot in the Israeli Air Force and I want peace. And suddenly, in 1 second, you realize how irrelevant all these words, peace, and I'm against this and for that. The fact that I am a pilot in the Air Force means that I am just like the pilot that sat in the Apache helicopter that shot a missile to the house of this guy sitting next to me and made his sister paralyzed. regardless of the fact that I'm not flying a attack helicopter, it all became meaningless. And in 1 second, all this pride of being a pilot and being an officer in the Air Force, and it's kind of a good status in the Israeli society, a very, very militaristic society. People listen to you, people think that you are better or whatever. In 1 second, all turned to a big, big shame. And I think I said everything I planned to say without one little detail. I just couldn't utter, I couldn't spell, I couldn't pronounce the word pilot. I couldn't just tell them what is my real job, that I'm still doing my reserve duty in the Air Force. But I think in that moment, I knew that something big has to change. And in the next months after that, I started going from one person to another in the Air Force. People I assume that maybe are feeling somewhat similar, and I maybe can convince them to do something about the situation. With the help of other people that already refused before and already had some experience with media, with these kind of declarations and petitions, we drafted the letter that declared that we are going to, from now on, refuse to obey these illegal and immoral orders. And we went from one pilot to another. I think we met with about 100 pilots in the Air Force. Some of them are retired, some were still flying. And it was a very interesting process because you can't really tell people exactly what you're doing, because you don't want to, you know, if you meet someone that is not for it, they can turn you in, and you know, you can end up in a different campaign, you know, trying to release yourself from prison, or not able to gather enough people and make a big statement. So it was a very delicate psychological process to kind of recruit people through stages of exposing your plan just eventually to those that passed all the stages of in this discussion. And we came up with almost 30 people, 27 pilots, and published this declaration in the eve of the Jewish New Year, in Rosh Hashanah 2003. And from that moment, my life totally changed. I thought that it will be like a few weeks of little work on the emails and sending some stuff and maybe talking to some journalists, but something that was too big to just end like that. And yeah, things started to happen. I started to be invited to speak in different places. I met many people inside, many Palestinian people, many international activists that broadened the way I look at the reality and gave some fundamental base, theoretical, philosophical, political context to the action that we took. And it was like going to university in a few months and studying many, many subjects and filling up on all the big gap that I had until then. And I'm still learning, but it was a very extreme, fast learning time. I can talk about it long, and there are many, many things that happened after. I want to just give a little bit of examples of what happened to people that wanted to join the petition, that were kind of sympathetic to what we were talking about, but eventually decided not to. And for example, this guy that we grew up together, he's a F-16 fighter pilot, already in reserve, but it's in Israel. The reserve pilots are flying every week, like 1 or 2 days, so it's almost like part-time job while having their civilian work. And he was very sympathetic to what we said, but eventually he said, you know what, I love flying too much, you know, I can't just risk being dismissed. Good luck. And he kept calling me every now and then, telling me the atmosphere in the squadron and how people react to that, and encouraged me to keep on, and saying that he's proud to be my friend, but he's still not having the courage to join. The same guy is still flying in the Air Force, and recently when I talked to him, I actually sampled him in a way every year or so, and saw how gradually he totally adapted to the system. And the same guy that 12 years ago, when we organized the petition, was shocked by the actions of the Air Force and told me that if ever he gets an order to bomb a university or a school or a hospital, of course he will refuse. The same guy is still serving, and for the last time I checked, he said, of course I will bomb it. You know, they hide their weapon there, you know, all this justification that you hear from the Israeli propaganda. And you know how in the last big attack on Gaza in the previous summer, they bombed hospitals, they bombed schools, universities, killed around 500 children. So the system around us is sometimes way stronger than ourselves. And when we choose to stay in some system, and it's not necessarily just the military, it's some kind of system that gives you explanations, rationalizations, comfortable context to your actions and your decisions, very strong changes can happen to you. And the red line that you put in front of you, saying that I will never cross this red line, is a very, very elusive. It always go forward, always go away from you. And another case with another attack helicopter pilot. He was already what we call a gray refuser. It's pilots that, or soldiers that feeling bad about what the military is doing, but they don't want to risk their job or their social status, friends, family, all this stuff. And they choose to just avoid going to the West Bank, or avoid, if it's a pilot, avoid going to these missions that they think are immoral. So he was one of them. And he told me how when they were shooting on a car somewhere in the West Bank, he saw that some people are coming to help the injured that they just shot, and he already shot another missile. And he had few seconds to decide if to move the finger and to move the missile aside so he doesn't hit the people who came to help the injured. But he was afraid that something will happen, and he was considering it for, I don't know, 6 or 9 seconds, and he didn't. And he killed those 2 people that eventually was found out they were Palestinian police that came to help the people in the burning car. And he said that he felt like Mengele, that did the selection with his hand in Auschwitz, you know, in all these stories that we were told when we were young. And he came to his commander and told him that he will not be part of his missions anymore. His commander kind of dismissed him, saying, okay, just take your time or whatever. What happened to him later is that he started reading excessively about these kind of things, soldiers, wars, conscientious objection. He's the one that actually introduced me to Hannah Arendt, you know, the great philosopher and the one who wrote The Banality of Evil and Eichmann in Jerusalem. He's the one that introduced me to this book and recommended. He used to send me quotes from the book explaining how the Himmler used to say, or the commanders used to influence the soldiers to maybe drink a lot of vodka before they go to the mass shooting in order for them to have easier time to cope with the difficult tasks. And he found similarities with the process that he went through, and he was really in a process of leaving that system. And when I came to him and showed him the letter, he was super excited. And he said, of course, I'll be part of that. A week or two before we published it, we came out with all the media campaign around it. He called me and he said that he decided not to, because he's too concerned. His job, his university studies, and he preferred kind of to support us from outside. Okay, I didn't want to force someone in when we know how we are going to be pressured from every direction, and maybe we'll need to sit in jail, who knows. I'd rather not have with us someone that is not sure. So I said, okay. And the same thing happened with this guy. I kept calling him every year or two since then. It was 12 years ago. The last time we talked was after the Second Lebanon War, 2007, I think, 6, 7. And he said, I'm not so much against these operations anymore. And, I have other things on my mind. I have a wife and a baby and a job. And for a while, I didn't want to do these missions. But now, if they ask me, I think I will go. And I listened to that. And it was really hard for me to believe. And I said, but don't you remember those processes of rationalization we were talking about? Don't you remember all the book of Hannah Arendt, of the banality of evil that you just quoted to me? You gave you told me to read this book. And he said, what book? I said, The Banality of Evil of Hannah Arendt. And he said, well, maybe I need to read it again. And then he said, oh, my wife is calling me and I need to... So I think this makes the point very clear that when we are in a system that is going downhill and losing its humanity and moral and morality and become brutal and cruel and racist, we are not guaranteed that we'll leave that downhill train in time. So it can happen to everyone. You can be a school teacher and slowly the curriculum is changing and you need to teach a little bit more of, like in Israel now, you need to, like kids in the kindergarten need to learn the Hatikva, the national anthem. And little by little, the education becomes more and more nationalist, more and more racist. And this process happened in a very, very extreme scale in Israel. I went a little too long about this issue. I want to just go now a little bit forward with things I was involved later and how I came to be part of the BDS movement. And then we will stop for a question and answer. Do you have time or something? Okay. Oh, maybe another. Okay, maybe another 5-10 minutes, and then we'll finish. After the refusal, yeah. After the decision to refuse and being part of the pilot's letter, I felt that it's time to say yes to something, not just to refuse, not just to say what you don't want to be part of, but what you want to be part of. And together with my brother, that is also a conscientious objector, and other activists, we met with Palestinian former fighters that were fighting in the first Intifada and spent many years in Israeli jails, and formed together what was later called the Combatants for Peace. The idea was that we put down our weapon and we struggled together against the occupation non-violently, and we felt that will be much more effective like that. If we go together, Israeli and Palestinian, to speak in Israeli school or in the Capitol Hill, it will give a unique effect. And at the beginning, when I was still involved in the organization, it was very important for us to stress the fact that it's an imbalanced conflict. It's a relationship between a colonizer and colonized, an oppressor and oppressed, an occupier and occupied, and not like two teams fighting against each other in an equal situation. Therefore, when you choose the nonviolent path, the oppressor side, the Israeli refuseniks, the Israeli activists, have to go all the way to the side of the Palestinians and join their struggle with the rhetoric, with the decisions, with the call for international pressure, all these things. And what happened later is that the organization drifted slowly to be something that today it still does a good work in some ways, more attractive to the mainstream Israeli lefties. But I chose a different path, and I thought that it's not about us. It's not about me. There is an occupation, there is an ongoing humiliation and killing and ghettoization and land confiscation and ethnic cleansing that is happening all the time. If I want to be part of the struggle, I need to join the other side. I need to join the side of the oppressed and make the whole journey there. I choose the non-violent way, but I can't say that the one who is defending itself from an occupying force do not have the right to fight back. I choose to cooperate with those who choose the non-violent way, but I can't come and preach the oppressed side how to resist. It's a big change of mindset. And the idea that we are not leading this struggle anymore. The struggle is the struggle of Palestinians to become free. And we choose to join that struggle. And it's a very different idea than the things that I was involved before. In 2009, we met a group of people that were, like probably many of you, shocked and discussed with the attacks on Gaza and operation, what they called Castled. And we formed this group that is called Boycott, or Boycott from Within. It's basically a group of Israeli citizens that support the Palestinian call for boycott, divestment and sanctions. The Palestinian call was organized around 2005, and we just joined that call as supporters from the Israeli society. And we recognize our unique position to help with these initiatives and to help defend those struggling in the BDS movement, being accused by the Israeli propaganda system of being anti-Semitic and all this nonsense. Once we are there, we try to add our name to different petitions, to write letters to different artists, to different people who come to speak in official institutions in Israel. There are numerous campaigns going on right now. Hopefully in this university something will start also soon. And yeah, basically that's the thing that me and my friends are mostly concentrated on. A few more things that people sometimes say, so what are you supporting boycott against your country while there are so many horrific things happening around the world? Like, how can you compare to, what the Israeli army is doing to what the American army is doing? It's if you compare the numbers of killing, it's a legitimate question, and my answer is that it's not a question of morality. It's not a question of steps and ladder of this is the most immoral thing, we boycott it, this is a little bit less moral, we don't boycott it. The boycott The BDS idea is that it's a great non-violent tool that could be used by everyone in the international community, inside Palestine, outside, to change the power balance. It's not about saying, okay, the Israeli army is the most cruel army. Though there are many other cruel armies, many other cruel occupations and horrible things happening. But this is the most practical, proof to work tool that we had in the last decades that people are trying to resist this occupation. And I feel with my whole heart that if you are concerned about what happened to people over there, if you have a family in Tel Aviv, in Jerusalem, whether they are Jews or Palestinians or whatever, this is the movement that you should join to now. And if you don't want, it's okay. The movement now, in 2015, soon 2016, is very, very big. Millions of people around the world are part of this movement. It becomes something that is getting more and more like the struggle to boycott the apartheid regime. So it's not a question if you like it or not. You can be part of this movement or you can stay on the side. The movement is going forward, and I believe that it will at some point change the power balance and force the Israeli government to do the three things that the BDS movement is calling for. One is to end the occupation. The other is to end the apartheid situation of the second-class citizens, Palestinian citizens of Israel. And the third is the promotion of the right of return of Palestinian refugees. The BDS movement doesn't talk about a specific solution. 1, 2, 3, 5 states, federation, other things. It's a human right-based initiative, saying that people should be equal. If you want to live in peace, you can't live while your boot is on the neck of your neighbor. If you want to live in peace, you can't live in a country that's defined by its ethnicity, its religion. It has to be equal for all, period. I find it a good thing to struggle for, and I hope some of you will consider that too.